الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربنا افتح بيننا وبين قومنا بالحق وأنت خير الفاتحين. أما بعد, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, and welcome to the Otago Quran Study Club Tuhfatul-Atfal Gateway to Tajweed course lesson 5. Alhamdulillah, we've done this course as a gateway to Tajweed to get a bit of an introduction into the science of Tajweed. So far, we've covered the introduction, the rules of Nun Sakina and Tanween, the rules of Mim and Nun Mushabbatain, the rules of Mim Sakina. Today, inshallah, we're going to be covering the next two chapters, the chapter of the Lam of Al and the Lam of the verb, as well as the chapter of Mithlaini wal Mutajanisaini wal Mutaqaribain. That should be pretty easy to speed through them, inshallah. For your information, this recording here is a separate recording that was done after the classes. This is actually my fourth attempt at the recording. So if I gloss over something or I don't go into too much detail, please excuse me. Feel free to reach out via email or in the drop-in sessions in any time for further clarification. So today we're going to be doing two chapters. So keep them in your notes as two separate chapters. The first one is as follows: the rules of Lam of Al and the Lam of the Fa'al. The Sheikh writes, and I quote, أحكام لام ال ولام الفعل للام الحالان قبل الأحرف أولاهما إظهارها فلتعرفي قبل 14 خذ علمه من إبغ حجك وخف عقيمه ثانيهما إدغامها في 14 أيضا ورمزها فعي طب ثم صل رحما تفز ضف ذا نعم دع سوء ظن زر شريفا للكرم واللام الأولى سمها قمرية واللام الأخرى سمها شمسية وأظهرن لام فعل مطلقا في نحو كل نعم وكلنا والتقى. Bismillah. Okay. The rules of Lam, Shamsiya, and Qamariya. Now, what is Al? Al, Alif Lam, in the Arabic language is what we call the definite article. It is something that precedes an indefinite word, such as to clarify it. Essentially, it is the same as the English word the, T-H-E, the. For example, Al-Kitab, the book. Now, there are two ways of pronouncing the lam in this definite article. We have Izhar, which we call Qamariya, and we have Idgham, which we call Shamsiya. First ruling, the ruling of lam Qamariya. Why do we call it Qamariya first off? We call it Qamariya, meaning lunar, because the Arabic word for moon, Al-Qamar, Al-Qamar, is an example of this ruling, Al, in which the lam is made clear. So if lam sakin in the term al is followed by any of these letters above, then the lam is going to be pronounced nice and clearly. And these letters are the 14 letters of إبغي حجك وخف عقيمه. ألف باء غين حاء جيم كاف واو خاء فاء عين قاف يا ميم هاء. If the lam comes before any of these letters, we pronounce it nice and clear. The alif of the definite article becomes a hamzatul wasl, a connecting alif, and is pronounced with a fatha at the beginning of a word, but not pronounced when joining the words. I'll give you some examples. Over here, I have a lam, I have the al, alif lam, so I know it's a definite article, followed by a qaf. Qaf is one of my letters of Qamariya, one of my letters of Izhar. So I'm going to pronounce this lam nice and clear. Al-Qur'an, Al-Qur'an. Another thing to note, this alif here, this connecting alif, all right, is no longer a connecting alif because it's actually the beginning. We're beginning the word from here. Thus, I'm going to be pronouncing this with a pretend hamza and a fatha. It's always going to be a, al, al-Qur'an. It will never be il-Qur'an. It will never be ul-Qur'an. It will always be with a fatha. Over here, I've got the same thing, same word, but I've got two words together. Thus, this connecting alif now does not become pronounced. Rather, it's a connection. It shows me that I'm going to go straight from this meme, jumping to the lam. علم القرآن علم القرآن. Another example. Over here, I have a lam. It's followed by one of the letters of izhar. It's qamariya. Okay? So I know I'm going to say al. Also, know I'm going to say al because it's the beginning of a word. So I'm going to pretend there's a fatha here and a hamza. Al-wazn. Al-wazn. Over here, it's connected. So I know this is just a connecting alif. It's going to be like a little jump. وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ. Pause the video and have a go at some of these examples. Sweet. You should have been able to pronounce all of the lams here nice and clearly. Al-insan. And you should have been able to use the hamzatul wasl as a connector, or if it's at the beginning, then you use it as a fatha, al-insan, or خلق الإنسان, where it connects, and so forth for all of these given examples here. The next ruling we have is the ruling of lam shamsiyya, in which we use idgham. We merge it, same as the idgham that we talked about in previous chapters. And this applies for the other 14 letters of the alphabet. The Arabic alphabet has 28 letters. They're split exactly in the middle. 14 for Shamsiyya, 14 for Qamari. And that is the first letter of each word in this couplet. طب ثم صل رحما تفز ضف ذا نعم دع سوء ظن زر شريفا للكرم طاء ثاء صاد راء نون ضاد ذال نون دال سين ظاء زاي شين لام. All right. So again, same concept, slightly different though. If lam sakin is followed by any of those letters, then the lam will not be pronounced. Will not be pronounced. The lam is silent. And instead, the letter after the lam is going to have a shadda on top. And as for the alif of al, the same rule applies. It's going to be a fatha if it's at the beginning of the word. However, if it's connecting, then it's just a connecting alif. Over here, an example. I have al, alif, and lam. Nice. All right. This I know it's going to be a fatha, because again, beginning of the word. And this lam here is followed by one of my letters of idgham, one of my letters of shamsiyya. I also know because it has a shadda on top. So this lam is going to be silent. I'm going to say an-najm. An-najm. Notice I completely skipped over this lam. I went straight from the alif to the nun. Over here, the alif is not the beginning of the word. The beginning of the word is the waw. So this alif is a connector. And when we say something, the alif becomes a connector, it means it becomes silent. Meaning both the alif and the lam become silent. I go from the waw straight to the nun. Wan-najm. Wan-najm. Another example. I have here the article al, okay, followed by one of my letters of shamsiyya, my letters of idgham. It also has a shadda on top. So I know that this lam over here is going to be, I'm going to use idgham, meaning I'm not going to pronounce it. This alif here, it's the beginning, so I'm going to pronounce it with a fatha. At-taghabun. At-taghabun. And if it's part of a sentence, or we read it as a sentence with the word before it, then this alif is a connecting alif. It now turns silent. So I'm really going to make the jump from the meme, skip the alif, skip the lam, go to the ta. يوم التغابن. يوم التغابن. Pause the video and have a go at all of these examples. Sweet. You should have been able to read through all of these in which you've made the lam nice and silent and connected the alif when it needed to be connected, or pronounced it with a fatha when it was at the beginning. Now, moving on to some exercises. Now, what I've done so far is I've explained to you that you need to know 14 letters for Qamariya, for Idhar, and you need to memorize 14 letters for Shamsiyya, for Idgham. Now, to make it a little bit easier on you, in that, another thing you can do is this method. This method only really works for the Madani Mus'haf. It might work for some of the other prints of the Quran. However, not every Mus'haf is going to be the same. But your classic mass-printed Medinan style Mus'haf, which is the most common one, which you will undoubtedly have in your local masjid, will have this in it. If the lam has nothing on top, then it is Shamsiyya. It is Idgham, it's not pronounced. If the lam has a sukoon on top, then it is Qamariya, it is Izhar, it is pronounced. If the letter after the lam has a shadda, then that is an indicator that it is the lam itself is going to be Shamsiyya, Idgham, not pronounced. If it does not have a shadda on the third letter, then that's an indicator that it's Qamariya, right? Izhar, and it is pronounced. الطعام الطعام اليوم اليوم. Now also keep in mind the lam alif. The lam alif, which is a lam and an alif connected to each other, that also counts as one of, it's just a different way of writing the same word. And the lam alif, it will always be Izhar. It's always going to be Qamariya. Why? Because Hamza alif is one of the letters of Qamariya. So it's still pronounced as normal. Al-a. Al-a. In this case, al-araiki. Or, see if there are any other examples. Over here, I have lam followed by a Hamza. Yes, it's written as like a lam alif, still pronounced exactly the same. Qamariya. Al-abrar. Al-abrar. Pause the video and have a go at each of these exercises. Check your answers. The first one, you should have done it Shamsiyya, Shamsiyya, Qamariya, Shamsiyya, Shamsiyya, Qamariya, Qamariya, Shamsiyya. Shamsiyya, Shamsiyya, Qamariya, 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 Shamsiyya. It's actually the word Ash-Shams. Qamariya, Shamsiyya, Shamsiyya. And that is all of them. Alhamdulillah. Now back to the actual matn, the poem. All right. What does it say? And now that we have this background knowledge, we can easily work through the English translation and really understand it. He says, the Sheikh writes, حكم لام ال ولام الفعل. Or in another narration, أحكام لام ال ولام الفعل. The ruling of the lam of al, the article, and the lam of the verb. للام الحالان قبل الأحرف أولاهما إظهارها فلتعرفي. The lam of al has two conditions when it occurs between the letters of the alphabet. The first one is إظهار. We talked about this. So know this. قبل 24 خذ علمه. If it comes before any of these 14, then take knowledge from, meaning any of these 14 letters, and then he gives us the phrase من ابغي حجك وخف عقيمه. And these are the letters of our إظهار. And it's actually a really nice piece of advice. He gives us a piece of advice saying, be desirous of your pilgrimage, meaning have the yearning, have the want to go to Hajj one day, and fear that one day it may become barren. Meaning, separate tangent, I won't go too deep into this, but one of the signs of Qiyamah is that Hajj will completely stop to an end. There will be no more Hajj. Hajj will end for humanity. No human is going to be able to go to Hajj anymore. So basically, he's telling you, he's encouraging you, get in quick, make sure you get your Hajj done as soon as possible so that you don't miss out on the opportunity. This is someone writing more than 200 years ago. SubhanAllah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all the opportunity to go to Hajj for those who have not gone. And for those who have gone, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from them and grant them the opportunity to go time and time again. ثانيهما إدغامها في 14 أيضا ورمزها فعل. And the second condition is idgham, again, and also 14 letters. So memorize this combination. Again, we said 14 letters for izhar, 14 letters for idgham. Perfect split. And it's the first letter in each of these words here. طب ثم صل رحما تفز ضف ذا نعم دع سوء ظن زر شريفا للكرم. Be good, join the family ties, and you will be prosperous. Meaning maintain your family, uphold the ties of kinship. Be hospitable to the one who possesses bounties or blessings. The blessed person, always be hospitable to them, always be kind to them. Shun any evil thought, or meaning leave behind any negative thinking, and visit the person who is distinguished for their generosity. The person who is known for their generosity, spend time with them, get to know them, because that's the kind of person you want to have as your friend. The person who has lots of bounties, lots of blessings, and the person who is very generous, these are the kind of people you want to keep in your circle and keep around you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surround us all with good people. Very good advice, by the way, that he puts in here. I know this is a work of tajweed and this is a tajweed class. However, tajweed cannot be separated from the knowledge of Islam and the tarbiyah, the ethics of Islam that we are taught to live our ethical lifestyles. واللام الأولى سمها قمرية واللام الأخرى سمها شمسية. As for the first one, the first type of lam, call it lunar. And as we said, lunar because the word al-qamar has izhar. And the second lam, call it solar. Why? Because again, we say ash-shams, the word for sun. Ash-shams has idgham. And then the next major part you need to know about this chapter, and there's only one line for this, so it's not that deep. I was considering, should I go down the whole rabbit hole of explaining all the different kinds of lam in tajweed and go into Arabic grammar and all of that? I think I'll just make it nice and easy. All you need to know, he says, وأظهرن لام فعل مطلقة في نحو كل نعم وكلنا والتقى. Observe the clarity, meaning make ilhar of lam when it is in a verb. Lam, if it comes in a verb, pronounce it clearly. For example, in the words of كل نعم كلنا والتقى. These are all examples of that. Now, how do I know when I'm reading Quran if the word is a verb or not a verb? Short answer, it's going to be too complicated for me to go into that. All you need to know is that when you're reading it from the Mus'haf, from the way it is written, you are going to be pronouncing it with izhar. Do not worry. If you've been paying attention so far and you've been going good with your Quran recitation, you should be able to pronounce it perfectly fine whether you know it's a verb or you don't know it's a verb. All you need to know is the following. Write this down. Lam in a verb will always be pronounced clearly, i.e. with izhar. That's all you need to know. Alright, alhamdulillah, that is the rulings of lam of al and the lam of the verb. Going on to the next chapter. Now this chapter, there's not a section of it in the worksheet, the book that we've given you. That's completely fine, I'll just explain it here. And you can find more information on this easily online. The Sheikh writes, and I quote, في المثلين والمتقاربين والمتجانسين إن في الصفات والمخارج اتفق حرفان فالمثلان فيهما أحق وإن يكونا مخرجا تقاربا وفي الصفات اختلفا يلقبا متقاربين أو يكون اتفقا في مخرج دون الصفات حققا بالمتجانسين ثم إن سكن أول كل فالصغير سميا أو حريك الحرفان في كل فكل كل كبير وافهما هو بالمثل. Okay, this chapter here is basically telling you about all the types of idgham. Now we've talked about idgham when we were discussing the nun sakina and tanween. We talked about idgham when we were talking about mim sakin. We talked about idgham just now when we talked about the rulings of lam of al, right? Basically, this is a summary of all of the different types of idgham that we are going to face in the Quran. Idgham occurs in many other places. So we have three types. Mutamathilan, that's two identical letters. Mutajanisan, two similar letters. Mutaqariban, two close letters. What are these rulings? So two identical letters, mutamathilan, that's when the two letters have both letters have the same makhraj, the same point of articulation, and the same sifat, the same characteristics or attributes. Meaning two of the same letter. Ba and ba. Two of the same letter. Mutamathilan. They're identical. And you actually have a background in this. Don't worry, you actually already know this because we talked about a type of idgham mutamathilan when we talked about idgham shafawi, labial idgham, labial merging, when we talked about the meme. Meme and meme merged together to make one big meme. All right? So, the only type you actually really need to know about is saghir, small idgham, because mutamathil, so all of these can be broken into subcategories. Really, all you need to know is saghir, the small type of idgham, the small idgham. All right? Over here, I have a lam followed by another lam. Now, what's important is that the first letter is sakin, meaning it doesn't have any vowel on top, and the second one has a haraka, it has a vowel on top. Thus, that's what makes them merge into each other. For example, kulla, kulla, right? Similarly, if you remember, looking back to our adgham shafawi, when we have a meme, all right, and it doesn't have any haraka on it, followed by another meme, all right, and another word or whatever, which does have a haraka in it, and it will always have a shadda. They merge into each other to make one big meme, where we do two harakas of ghunnah, right? And we use the vowel of the second one. Same applies, but for literally any two letters. Any two letters next to each other. The first one is sakin, and the second one has a haraka. They merge into one big letter. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now, the idgham mutamathilan kabir and mutlaq. We'll go over it, just skim it briefly. This is not really idgham. There's no merging. That's when you have the first letter has a haraka, the second letter has a haraka, or the first letter has a haraka, the second one has a sukoon. Actually, there's no merging because these are separate entities. For example, over here, al-kitab bil-haq. Sorry, al-kitab bil-haq. The first one has a haraka. We pronounce it nice and separate. The second one also has a haraka, nice and separate. There's no merging here. Bil, kitab bil. Again, over here, technically the second one also doesn't have a haraka, but again, it's going to be a separate entity. Shaqaqna, shaqaqna. We don't say shaqqana. Doesn't work because the fatha is on the first letter, the first qaf. So the first qaf is only pronounced independently. The second one also pronounced independently. There's no merging. So that is the idgham, the merging of mutamathilan, the two identical letters. Now we move on to the merging of the mutajanisan, the two similar letters. That is two letters which have the same makhraj, the same point of articulation, but different sifat, different characteristics. So these are letters which usually come in little clusters, kind of thing, kind of clumps. You have wa, dal, and tha. They all come from a similar place, however, they're slightly different. Wa, the, tha. You have ta, dal, and ta. At, ad, at. And you have meme and ba. We've talked about the example of meme and ba multiple times. Remember, when we're talking about when we're talking about them coming from the lips. And if you guys remember, that is the ruling of إخفاء شفوي. Label إخفاء, when you have a meme second followed by a ba, then that meme is going to be made silent. So you already know the stuff. All I'm doing is we're taking it outwards, going into the deep ocean and learning about how it applies to all the different letters of the alphabet, not just meme or not just one. So صغير, same thing. When you have the first letter has a sukun, the second letter has a haraka. All right. In this case, we have ba, and the second one, this one doesn't have a haraka. The second one has a haraka. This ba is going to merge into the next one, into the next letter, basically making it silent. I'm not going to say irkabe ma'ana. I'm going to say irkam ma'ana, irkam ma'ana. And then adgham kabir and adgham mutlaq, not really a thing. Again, they're not really idgham. This is my opinion, by the way. This is my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. But basically, all you need to know, they're not merged into each other. They're two separate entities. This ta has its own vowel. Sorry, this ta has its own vowel. The ta has its own vowel. You're not going to pronounce them as one sound. You need to separate the two sounds from each other. فالصالحات طوبى حات طوبى. You don't say حات طوبى. No. حات طوبى. Same over here in the mutlaq. We have the first one has a haraka, the second one is sakin. First one is vowed, the second one is unvowed. Again, we say أفتطمعون. We don't say أفتطمعون. Doesn't really work. Now, the exception to this rule is when we have ta followed by ta. Ta followed by ta. أحط 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 بسطت فرطتم فرطت. Right? The merging is slightly different. We actually do make the ta nice and we don't make it nice and clear, but we clarify the ta. It's not hidden. The ta does not completely evacuate. It still shows through. And that is the idgham of mutajanisan, the idgham of the two similar letters. Easy. Now moving on to the idgham of mutaqariban, the idgham of the two close letters. That's when both letters are close in either their makhraj, their articulation point, or in their sifa, in their characteristic. And again, in clusters. So the first one is idgham of nun sakin and tanween. We talked about this. Yarmulun. If you've forgotten, go back to your notes, go back to the recordings, whatever. See what we've talked about when we talked about idgham of nun sakin and tanween. That is a type of idgham mutaqariban. Nun sakin followed by ya, ra, mim, lam, waw, nun. Another example of mutaqariban is we have lam and ra, come from the same or similar places. Qaf and kaf. And what do you know? Also something familiar. When you have al, the article of al, all right, followed by a shamsi letter, a solar letter, exactly like we talked about, ash-shams. And thus, these are mutaqariban letters. They're close to each other, so they merge in the way of mutaqariban. So صغير, again, that is when you have a small type of idgham. So again, remember we have small idgham for each of these three. That's the one I want you to focus on. That's the main one, right? Where we have the first letter is unvoweled, second, and the second letter is voweled, mutaharrik, as a haraka. Over here, for example, I have a lam, I have a ra, right? These are letters which are both close, but they're not the same. They don't share an articulation point, so these are going to be mutaqariban. They're going to be close. I'm going to hide the lam, go straight to the ra. وَقُرْ رَبِّي. I've essentially jumped from the qaf to the ra. Same here. Again, you should be familiar with this because we just went over it. I have alif lam, al, okay, nice. I have dad, that's one of my letters of shamsiyya. It also has a nice little shadda on top, so I know that this lam is shamsiyya. All right, I'm going to go straight from the alif to the dad. Little jump. الضحى الضحى. Again, over here. Right. I have a qaf followed by a kaf. Qaf is second. Anything. Kaf has a haraka on it. ألم نخلقكم نخلقكم. Right. They've merged into each other. Pause the video. Have a go at this one. See how you would read it. Sweet. If you said من يعمل, then you are correct. If you said ما يعمل, you are not correct because you were not paying attention enough in our second lesson when we talked about how you pronounce the ghunna here. There's a bit of an exception. Basically, it's the same concept of idgham of mutakariban, صغير, right? However, we apply the ghunna in the case of the nun sakin or tanween as we talked about extensively in our second lesson. Now kabir, that's when you have both letters have their own haraka. Again, if they have their own haraka, they're independent entities, they do not get merged with each other. Narzuqukum. I didn't say narzuqukum, two kafs. I didn't say narzuqukum, two qafs. I said narzuqukum, two nice, separate, clear entities. That is your summary of the rulings of idgham of mutamathilan, the two identical letters, mutajanisan, the two similar letters, and mutaqariban, the two close letters. Feel free to screenshot this and work through it again if you need the time. Back to our tuhfa, the actual text of the poem. Let's go over it again. The Sheikh writes, في المثلين والمتقاربين والمتجانسين. In the rulings about the idgham of the identical letters, the close letters, and the homogeneous or the similar letters. إن في الصفات والمخارج اتفق حرفان فالمثلان فيهما أحق. If two letters agree in the attribute and in their makhraj, their place of articulation, then we call them mithlain, equivalent or identical or the same. وإن يكونا مخرجا تقاربا وفي الصفات اختلفا يلقبا متقاربين. وفي رواية أخرى, in another narration, متقاربين. And if they, the two letters, are close in their makhraj, their point of articulation, but they're different in their sifa, in their attributes, then we call them mutaqariban, close. All right, close letters, two close letters. We talked about that extensively. أو يكون اتفقا في مخرج دون الصفات حققا بالمتجانسين. Or if they agree in their place of articulation, but not in their attribute, all right, the same place of articulation, but not the same attribute. For example, mim and ba. Then we call them mutajanisain, which in this translation homogeneous, or you can call them similar, if you like. Similar, homogeneous, same thing. ثم إن سكن أول كل فالصغير سميا. So for each of these two pairs of letters, which we're merging into each other, if the first of any of these groups is unvoweled, i.e. sakin, and the next one is voweled, then we call this minor idgham, صغير, small idgham, minor idgham, صغير. We talked about idgham مثلين, صغير, متقاربين, صغير, متجانسين, صغير, small, small, small. أو حرك الحرفان في كل فكل كل كبير وافهمنه بالمثل. Or if the two letters of any of the pairs of the above three groups have a vowel, then we call them major idgham, kabir, idgham kabir, and understand it with examples. I've given you examples, and from the examples we've understood that they're not really merged into each other. They're actually two separate entities. We don't merge them into one letter. All right, I hope that helps. Inshallah, that is kind of a summary of the rulings of lam of al and the lam of the verb, and a summary of the idgham of mithlain, mutaqaribain, and mutajanisain. Right up about this point, we've covered pretty much everything, almost everything in terms of idgham. We're not going to be covering idgham in any other kind of capacity after this. So alhamdulillah, don't worry. I know that's kind of been the hardest point for many of you. Now it's kind of over. Once you've learned this, you've pretty much learned everything you need to know about idgham, and we're good to move on from there. From here, we've actually done pretty much the majority of the tuhfa. The only thing we need to talk about after this is the rulings of the elongation, and that can take us 1 or 2 weeks. We'll see how we go depending on time and depending on how much time you guys need really to learn the content, inshallah. Reminder, drop-in sessions are active. Please try and attend one. If you have any questions regardless, you can either ask them in the drop-in sessions, email them through, or ask via our WhatsApp groups. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت. جزاكم الله خيرا and thank you so much for coming. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.